Good morning everyone and welcome to this sensational theatre here at Bob Hawke College. How lucky we are to be here. I know we have students here from far and wide. I believe we've got some Bunbury students, Northern students, and there are schools represented from all over the metropolitan area. It is so fantastic to see you all here today. We're grateful for you coming. We are in the presence of greatness today, and what an opportunity this is for everyone. So thank you to our special guests who will introduce properly in a moment, and thank you to you all for being here. Our thanks as well to John Burt, the principal of Bob Hawke College. Thank you so much for everything that you have done to make this possible. We're very grateful to you. To start today, I'd like to introduce a special senior student who will share with us an acknowledgement of country. Please make welcome Emily Stricker.
Good morning everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Emily and I am a Year 11 student at Bob Hawke College. I would like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people as the traditional custodians of this land. I pay respects to the elders past and present and recognise their ongoing connection to the land and culture. At school and within our community, we've recognised the significance of Whadjuk Noongar language and culture and their ongoing struggles for justice and recognition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Our guests today have a story that more or less reads like a Hollywood movie script, except it's real life. Interestingly enough, when Professors Richard Scolyer and Georgina Long developed a revolutionary immunotherapy treatment, it proved to be a treatment for cancer, for melanoma. And they knew that they held in their hands the key to saving thousands of Australian lives. What they actually didn't know at that point was that this same medical breakthrough would actually hold the key to saving one of their lives. Unbelievably, in a really cruel twist of fate, last June, Richard was diagnosed with stage 4 incurable brain cancer. So Georgina had a brilliant idea, and that was to use all their learnings and to use this medical breakthrough that they'd come up with and tweak it a little bit and devise a world-first experimental treatment for the particular type of brain cancer that Richard had, making him the first person to have pre-surgery combination immunotherapy. To tell you more about their journey, I'd like to introduce someone very special in our Department of Education, Mr. Jim Bell. He's the Deputy Director General of Student Achievement, and he's representing the Director General of Education today. Please make him welcome, Jim Bell.
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate that welcome, and thank you, Em, as well, for your acknowledgement of country. That was fantastic. I was saying to Mac earlier, I actually get the opportunity to do these sorts of things a lot. So you go and open events and you talk at events and you talk about education. But actually, when you look at this event, you don't get to do this event terribly often at all. And I was saying to Mac earlier that actually, for all of you, and it's so great to see so many students here from across the length and breadth of the state, possibly budding scientists and medical practitioners and researchers as well, to see you here is fantastic. And I just wanted to impress on you that you probably won't get too many more of these opportunities in your life. And having done lots of this sort of talking, I haven't actually done much of this. And so the exposure that you have today to interact with and meet the current Australians of the year and to listen to and engage with their work is such an amazing opportunity. And I just wanted to impress that on you because you've got a lot of years ahead of you and you won't get too many more of these opportunities. To sit here today with Professor Long and Professor Scolyer is amazing. They're both officers of the Order of Australia. So what that means, and you can look it up, and I'll probably have the words a little bit wrong here, but effectively that means that both professors have been honoured for outstanding achievement and service to, and this is the important part, to Australia and humanity. So that is a seriously high bar to reach. I can tell you I haven't reached that bar, and I'm nowhere near it. But to have the AO after their names to be admitted as officers of the Order of Australia is a significant achievement indeed. And so in terms of their story, so less than a decade ago, and you probably read this, a diagnosis of advanced melanoma was effectively a fatal diagnosis. But the work of Georgina and Richard, and you'll hear about that soon as they interact with Mac and indeed yourselves, has made what was once an incurable disease something we can actually fight and something we can win against. It's an amazing field of work. They've pioneered an immunotherapy approach to dealing with this, which actually activates a patient's own body to fight the cancer. Now, I'm probably going to get into a space I don't know about. You feel free to correct me. But as I understand it, and I'm a teacher, by the way, so there's no doctor or professor in my title. I'm a teacher by trade. But as I understand it, chemotherapy, that you all would be very familiar with, effectively impacts the whole body. Immunotherapy targets cancer. And I feel free to correct me in that space. It's a very lay term, but significantly less impact on the body and very targeted. But you might hear a different version of that shortly. But significant work. Professor Long and Scolyer are co-medical directors of the Melanoma Institute of Australia, and they've not only led this body of research, but they've also become prominent voices. I was only chatting to Georgina about this earlier, advocating for safe behaviour and melanoma prevention, and they'll talk a bit more about that in their conversation today. But here's the amazing bit, and Matt touched on this, is that a little over a year ago, Richard received that diagnosis, stage 4 brain cancer. That is not the news that anyone gets. We may have all been touched by cancer in some way, certainly affecting my family at the moment, and it's very sobering news to receive. And so that would take a lot to get your head around. It would take a lot of sort of adjusting in your own mind. What's amazing about this is that both Richard and Georgina have turned that news into an opportunity to not only help Richard, but also help others, and that's the humanity bit. So this body of work can literally help thousands, if not millions of people that are currently affected and those that will be affected moving forward. It's an amazing body of work they've developed. That might be my cue to get off, actually. That's just a start. Okay. I did say I might push my 2 minutes to 3 or 4. Time's up. I will be finished shortly. They've developed a world-first treatment based on their melanoma research, and again, this is the amazing bit, with Richard actually becoming the subject of that research. This is it's truly an amazing story. So as you listen to the conversation today, again, I want to impress on you, one, the courage to do this body of work and to be the subject of this research, but two, is the very selfless approach that both of our professors have taken in doing this body of work. And again, when you look at the honours that have been bestowed upon them, it's actually about what they've done for other people. And I think you'd all agree that as a society, we're a much better place when we're less focused on self and actually more focused on what we can do for those around us. No two better examples than Professor Long and Professor Scolyer, so would you please make them very welcome today.
Now this is where I get to sit back and where you get to do all the work. We have some fantastic student ushers in the room. If you could raise your hands or your mics. They're going to be, there's one there. Now they are going to be walking around the room taking your questions, and this is all about you. I'm not going to be the interviewer here, you are. So Professors Scolyer and Long are on notice that you've got the toughest interviewers here in the room. They're here to take your questions, and so what I'd like you to do is raise your hand if you have a question, and when you come to ask it, if you could please give us your name, the school that you come from. That would be fantastic, and whoever you'd like to address your question to, that would be absolutely great. There are actually 2 prizes as well. There's a little bit of incentive today to ask the best question. I'm not going to be the judge of that. I'm as a journalist, I'm a very harsh judge of good questions. We have a judging panel here, and two of the students today will walk away with a $50 voucher for having asked the best question in the room. So, you know, you need to be digging deep at the moment to walk away with one of those. We'll announce those winners at the end. Now, Richard, I think is there a microphone somewhere over there?
I first of all wanted to ask I'll put my hand up for a question.
You want to ask me a question? I thought I was not going to be doing any work here.
You're getting called Professor. I'm sure Georgina's comfortable too. Call us Georgina and Richard.
Georgina and Richard?
Yeah. Worked with an incredible team of people that have worked together as a team that's accomplished some great work that we're very proud to be part of.
So, Georgina and Richard, welcome. While we're getting feedback here, I'm going to move away from you a little bit to solve that problem. I want to start by saying, and Jim touched on this, that cancer affects every single one of us. I just want to share a little bit about a story very close to me, someone in my life, in fact, someone who is a mother figure to me. A few weeks ago was diagnosed with stage 4 terminal brain cancer. You know the story, Richard. And she was given 3 weeks to live. We're currently in week 4, so we are literally going day by day. What you have done is probably too late for my beautiful Ros. However, what you have done and what you are doing is going to change the lives of so many people that follow in her footsteps. It is a complete game changer. On that note, I wanted to get an update from you, Richard, as to your health and where you are at in this journey.
I want to put it in context. You're right that brain cancer, well, certainly the subtype of it's the worst of the worst when it comes to cancer that's basically incurable, and sounds like the same sort of issue for your dear friend and relative. But the issue for me is I'm only one patient. We know from our work in melanoma, but also across medicine, to make a difference, you have to prove it works. And when you're doing something on one patient, it doesn't prove anything. It's given us an opportunity to use a great team of people who are scientists and clinician scientists like Georgina and I, to see are there any clues there that this is worth exploring more. But ultimately, to prove whether something works or not, you need to do a clinical trial. And there's a lot of hard work happening to try and get this idea that Georgina came up with to try out learnings in melanoma to see if it would make any difference. And we've generated some science by our great team of researchers analysing my brain, and there's some hope there, but it's not definitive. So that's ultimately where we need to get to next, to see if it makes a difference for people. Because I don't know whether it's made a difference to me that the average survival for someone like me, for what I've had, probably 6 months. I'm here at 15 months. It could be luck, or it could be related to the treatment. No one knows that. So we have to do a clinical trial.
And what's that? I might even put that down. What's that moment like when you receive this diagnosis and I can tell that your relations, you appear like best friends, colleagues, work colleagues and best friends. And then Georgina says to you, actually, I've got an idea, Richard. You know that cancer treatment, that cancer cure? Why don't we just tweak that and we'll use that on you? Can you talk to me, Georgina, about what that was like?
Well, first of all, I want a show of hands. Who's curious? Who's generally curious? Okay, I can't really see that. Everyone. Okay, next question. Who's got a special interest in science? I want to see all the same hands go up. Are they all up? Because if you're curious and you're asking questions and you're wondering why or can we or do we or why does this happen, then you're thinking in science. And that's the crux of what we do at Melanoma Institute Australia. But a little bit of a background might help the kids understand. Is it all right if I call you kids? Is that okay?
100%.
I see myself as a kid too, just a kid in an older person's body. But you won't understand that till you're older. But
Yeah.
So if we just put a bit of a background, we come from an institute called Melanoma Institute Australia. We're affiliated with the university. Richard and I run a laboratory together of researchers. Can you still hear me at the back? Yeah. And in that laboratory, we have people who are doing their PhDs, so they've already done a degree and they're really deepening their understanding of doing research. We have postdocs, they're people who've got a PhD, we have senior scientists. But on the other side, at the Institute, we have our clinics. Now, I'm a medical oncologist. That's a specialist who develops drug therapies for cancer. That's what I do. I run clinical trials. I see 80 to 100 patients a week. About half of them will be on a drug trial at any one time. The other half might be getting standard of care or be doing well and be cured, and we're just following them very closely. So that's what I do. Richard, pathologist, do you want to explain? Because I want to talk about team science in a minute.
Yeah, so my job is I'm a doctor, but I specialise in pathology, and my role is when people have a biopsy done or a sample taken, when there's concern that may be cancer or not, it's sent to me to look at, and we look at it when it's cut out, and then ultimately look at it under a microscope and do special tests, firstly to establish a diagnosis, so predominantly in melanoma, is it a cancer or not a cancer? And if it is a cancer, to work out how bad it is, how nasty it is, what sort of treatment is the patient going to need related to the pathological features of it.
And maybe just to expand on that, so if you had something on your skin, and this tends to be in older people. Oh, do you need these? So when we say biopsy, what we mean is a little sample of the skin lesion, let's say. So the dermatologist or a general practitioner might do that. That gets sent to a lab, a pathology lab, and that's where Richard and his team will look down the microscope and tell us, is this a cancer or not? And then that gets sent back to the doctor who's looking after the patient. So that's just to give you a sense of what we do. But in our team, we have surgeons, dermatologists, medical oncologists like me, we're the drug people, radiation doctors, and we work together as a team to try and solve the problem. We also have a whole research program because, frankly, we'd rather put ourselves out of a job. Let's prevent the disease. Let's prevent skin cancer and melanoma. And just a quick thing on melanoma, it is the deadliest form of skin cancer in our country. We've got the gold medal in terms of number of cases.
Not the gold medal we want.
It's Australia's cancer. Diagnosis every
30 minutes, one Australian gets diagnosed with melanoma, and one Australian dies of this disease every 6 hours.
Good news. Wow. 10 years ago, it was every 5 hours. So we've made an improvement in terms of the death rate. So when cancer spreads, that's what we're worried about. Most melanoma on the skin is cured when caught early or can be prevented by being sun safe. Over 95% of skin melanomas in this country are due to the sun.
And just to add in one more thing that might relate to you young guys here, it's actually the commonest cancer in 20 to 39-year-olds in our country. It used to be 15 to 39-year-olds. So it can have an impact on all of us, including you guys.
The problem is we all think that it's cool as Aussies to be brown, to be tanned, right?
Yeah. And the problem is the lag time. I mean, we were talking about it this morning, is you have your exposure now and it catches up with you usually in 20, 30 years. Yeah. Although there's people who get melanoma in their 20s, it's rare, but it is the commonest cancer. But people who are young don't get cancer commonly, but it catches up later. So what you do now impacts later.
The problem is these young people are bombarded by images every day of, the bronze, tanned, beautiful people all over social media.
Don't call them beautiful.
Well, that's the way they're portrayed, Richard. What is your message in regards to...
Kardashian effect.
Yes, the Kim.
So does anyone know, can anyone put up their hand and say tanning, is it popular at your school? Is it sort of bandied about as something that's, be honest?
I can see nodding but not hands going up. Yeah. So
there's some hands up.
So when your skin tans from the sun, That's actually your skin sending you a strong message and saying, get out of the sun, we're having to change colour to protect you, we may not be able to do it, if you don't stop, we're going to change and mutate. This is what a tan is, it's SOS.
Skin cells in trauma, that's what happens. They're damaged by the sun, and how they're trying to protect your body is put out pigment into your skin to try and absorb the ultraviolet radiation that's coming from the sun.
So what do you think? If you're using fake tan, do you think that's helping with the problem? I can't really
That's
see.
a good question.
Why don't we start some of the questions? If you'd like to raise your hand to have a chat about tanning, melanoma, skin damage, or if you get any other questions,
I'm
let's ask them now.
curious, and I would love to hear what they
While we're
think.
getting the mic over here, you spoke about the Sun Safe Ambassador program, which sounds really fascinating. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, I might just answer Georgina's question first of all about is putting on fake tan, is that damaging your skin? So it's a little complex. We think of it as glamorising tanning, so making it popular to get a tan. The actual putting on a fake tan doesn't actually damage your skin, but
It doesn't cause skin cancer, it is still chemicals.
but it popularises this look of having a tan, and then many people therefore go out into the sun and get damaged by the ultraviolet radiation, which ultimately causes skin cancer to 2 in 3 Australians.
You're saying it perpetuates the whole cycle.
Exactly.
So this is where science comes in. I'm curious, okay, why does that happen? You think that's a social question, but no, it's actually scientific. Why does that happen? Why is it that glamorizing tanning, fake tan, pushes people to get a tan? What is the psychology and how is that happening? What's the mechanism that this is spreading like a virus amongst young people across the world?
That's a question we need answered.
We have a question up here.
Oh, hi, I'm a teacher from Valcata Senior High School. Look, what I'm curious about is you said that your body reacts to tan, is actually a reaction to try and put pigment into your skin. So is tanning, if you've got a darker skin, is it such a worry? Like what I'm getting at is with our changing population in Australia, not everyone's pale and red-headed. So is it still such an issue, or is it, I just want to know, I don't understand it.
It's a fantastic question that you raise, and people who've got paler skin, more ultraviolet radiation gets absorbed and more damage occurs to the cells within the skin. So people with paler skin have got a higher risk of getting skin cancer from ultraviolet radiation compared to people with much darker skin. So the point you raise is very relevant. It's not zero in 2 ends of the spectrum, but definitely there's more risk for people who've got very pale skin, like me.
Hands up with any questions. Our ushers are waiting. There's one down here. Thank you so much. Any more? So we can get people.
Do you want me to fill in
Microphones?
about the sun safety?
Yes, I'd love to hear about that. It sounds fantastic and something that our young people might be interested in assisting with.
So at Melanoma Institute Australia, a few years ago, we started a program because we really wanted to get to our young people in terms of glamorization of tanning and understand, because education and knowledge is power. So the program we have, which we're actually going to after this, the Perth program, is where we gather year 9 and 10 students from high schools around the state, and then we give them an education program on melanoma and skin cancer and how it's caused. They look down a microscope like the pathologists do. They can see it under the microscope, what the cancer cells are doing. And then an educator who educates in communication skills at the TEDx level, so really good communication skills, teaches the group how to get a message across back to peers. They then go back to the school and give the message back. But the question is, does it work? And that's what science is about, measuring. How does that work? So it's another question I have for everybody is how would you measure whether something like the sun safety program we have is working?
Good question. We have somebody over here in the middle. Would you mind standing up?
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you.
My name is Esther Matthews, and I'm from Governor Stirling Senior High School, which is in Woodbridge, Londonish. I just wanted to say I'm very grateful to be here and to be talking to you both as an aspiring oncologist. So,
Wow.
yeah, really wonderful to be here today. My mum was involved in some treatments called Gotham trials at Peter Mac Institute in Victoria. And
Which trial?
Gotham,
Gotham?
Gotham. There were a combination trial of immunotherapy and radiology. And I noticed like some similarities in between like the research work that you guys have been doing in the Melanoma Institution and the research they were doing at Peter Mac. And I was just wondering, like, how important do you think interdisciplinary like collaboration is in oncology research, and how has it helped you other than in Richard's own treatment after being diagnosed?
That's a great question. It's critical. The short answer, absolutely critical. And I think we alluded to it before about team science. We all have different skills. So the Gotham trial you're talking about there was a standard immunotherapy that's available. It's on what we call the PBS. That's our Australian system to get drugs funded for all of us. And so these immunotherapies are there for melanoma people who have the melanoma spread around the body, advanced melanoma. And this trial in particular was looking at how radiotherapy combined with immunotherapy may impact the survival of the patient. And that's what that trial is. But you point out two really good points. Number one, when we do science, we first ask the question. It's never perfect, and that's okay. It's okay not to be perfect. And then we then try to design a trial to answer the question to the best of our ability. Then we report the results, and it may or may not change what we do in the clinic, but that's the process. And sometimes you come up with a negative answer. We've had some radiotherapy trials which have been negative that did not help the patient. This is before immunotherapy. And then that means we can do away with that treatment and we need to focus on another treatment. So this is the scientific process. It's not perfect, but it evolves, and it's the best we have to try and move our world forward. And we just keep asking questions. We learn one thing because it's another question to ask at the end of it. So multidisciplinary interactions are absolutely critical. You can't do one thing alone. You can have an idea. The idea, in fact, when I came up for Richard, but to make that and implement it, the patient has to agree to it and consent. That's a massive process in and of itself. But then you need to implement it, and you need people who can help implement it. It's a big process. So you bring up a really key point. Science happens with teams.
Yeah, I wanted to pitch in on the teamwork, and I couldn't agree more with what Georgina said about the importance of people with different skill sets coming together to make a change. And it's obviously important to us in medicine, but actually it flows through to many other aspects of life with people who want to work together to make a difference, particularly if they've got complementary or different skill sets to address problems. So whatever you decide to do in your life, be good at working as a team, and you'll achieve a lot more.
And respect. Respect is so important. Education, knowledge is power. Respect, truth, and coming together to try and make a difference. So respect the skills of other people, because then you get the full breadth of all of that thinking and skill set.
The last one that I'd add is hard work, and we do work hard, like you guys no doubt do as well. But I think it helps when you have a good team of people that work together, you respect each other, you appreciate the advances that you can make as a team, and you feel happier, more confident about pushing the boundaries and working harder.
We have another question up here, I believe. If you could stand up, that would be great. Is there somebody up here? Who's got the mic? It's hard for us to see down here.
I've got the microphone here.
Oh, so anybody, hands up. Next question. I wanted you talk about a whole heap of attributes, the teamwork, the collaboration, the respect. What about the bravery? What about the bravery? How did you get so brave?
Well, one thing is, because we've worked in melanoma and cancer for so long, And one particular interest of mine as a drug doctor had been melanoma that spread to the brain. And in fact, led the first trial of called combination immunotherapy in melanoma that spread to the brain. Melanoma is pretty nasty. 15 years ago, just to go back on melanoma, 15 years ago, if you got melanoma that had spread, now remember, most melanoma is cured with simple surgery when you pick it up on the skin.
95% of our people will be cured.
So what we're talking about is when one of the little melanoma cancer cells escapes. Often it escapes before your GP or dermatologist can remove it. It just escapes really at the get-go sometimes in that 5%. And so when it escapes, it can go anywhere in the body. That's what's a little bit frightening of what used to be frightening about melanoma. And one place it liked to go to was the brain, the liver, the bone, but the brain particularly. And so we did a trial that actually I designed with the team at MIA, comparing combo immune with one drug immune in melanoma that had spread to the brain, and showed definitively how much better combo was. And that changed practice overnight, literally overnight, across the world. And so it's with that sort of knowledge you come to other cancers, and likewise we can learn from other cancers as well. So the team who worked with Richard's team were what we call neuro-oncology specialists. They hadn't used immunotherapy in that way and were frightened, because it's a different cancer, of the effect it could have. The brain could swell up and cause a lot of damage for Richard. But because we'd had a vast length of experience of melanoma that had spread to the brain, we were less concerned. Richard and I chair our big meeting. We have a big meeting that goes for 2 hours every Friday, where we talk all about the tricky cases of melanoma. So our whole team really have seen this evolution of these drugs that the medical oncology team were working on. This is part of it. They're part of seeing this. So for us, and Richard, only you can speak as a patient and how that feels, but as someone coming up with the idea, and the team in melanoma weren't as frightened as people who may not have used the drugs in that way.
Well, there's one really important additional point that Georgina put on the table, and it was this idea about having the immunotherapy before the tumour was debulked. The problem with this sort of cancer is that it's got tentacles or tree roots around the periphery. And what you can see in an X-ray, or what the surgeon can see when they get in there, you can't cut it all out. You can't get it all out with local therapy. So we need something that will select out cancer cells and not knock off your normal brain cells. There's not too many just there if you're someone like me. So anyway, that's why...
I think you've got plenty to spare, I'm just saying. Plenty more than me, I'm just saying, Richard.
Well, that's why immunotherapy is so attractive, because you're teaching your body's immune system to recognise cancer cells and leave your normal brain cells alone. The other point was we've found in melanoma, and we're doing trials when this all came about. A lot of it some of it had been published, but we know that if you give the immunotherapy when there's a big bulk of tumour on board, the immunotherapy, the immune system learns about the tumour more and is better at attacking the tumour cells. So this idea of giving combination immunotherapy before my tumour was debulked, no one had tried this before, no one had done this, and we know from our work, and as the pathologist who looks down the microscope at specimens that are taken out after 6 weeks of immunotherapy, I was blown away by the changes that we've seen, and it's now changed the field in melanoma. Just in the last couple of months, this data Georgina made public at the world's biggest cancer conference. Anyway, I'd seen the changes when she came up with this idea. Give it before surgery. Didn't take much to convince me, but there was some risk. We know if you give immunotherapy, it's not likely to work so well if you give it after chemotherapy. So I had to forego the normal chemotherapy, and there's risks associated with that it was shortening my life. But I was comfortable that this was the right track to go down, and hopefully we would generate some science which would change the the opportunities, the field to try and make a difference to cancer for which treatment hadn't changed in 20 years. And we've generated science. The next step is to do a clinical trial to see if it actually does work.
Just another day at the office, Richard. Nothing more than that. We've got a question up here, I believe.
So, hi, I'm Asini Lichkina from Long and Scolyer. And so I was wondering about this. So as I understand, this is still in the testing stage. So what different testing stages will have to go through before it becomes available? And if it is successful, how long will it be until it becomes available to the general public?
So this is what us medical oncologists do in developing drugs. So I alluded to the process that you heard with brain melanoma spread to the brain, and I spoke before about the scientific process. So as Richard highlighted, one person is not enough. So just to highlight a few things, the combo that I'd come up with is actually not a standard combo in any cancer, not even melanoma. And that was using the concepts of the worst melanomas where we know there's no immune engagement. The way these drugs work is they stimulate the immune system, particularly T cells. Who knows what T cells are? I'm really impressed. I don't know in Western Australia, I'm sure it's just the same, but in New South Wales, the curriculum for science for year 11 and 12 is out of this world. Look at what you have to learn for immunology in science. Is anyone doing immunology in science? Anyone here?
Yeah, a few people.
You have yeah, I can't really, we can't see because of the lights, so sorry guys.
Yep,
It's fantastic what they're learning at year 11 and 12. It's what we used to learn when I was growing up.
How do you know that, Georgina?
Because biology projects with my kids who are now out of school, but yes, so I'm so impressed. So what we're doing, that's it, now we can see you. Hallelujah! Woo.
Excellent.
So what we are doing with these drugs is that we're stimulating the T cells to kill the cancer better. So the drugs themselves don't do the work. Your own body, your own immune system does. So there's this handshake that happens between immune cells and tumour cells. Because you don't want your immune cells to get too overactive, right? What if they're overactive? Someone tell me, what happens if your immune cells are too overactive? And yes.
They start also killing all the healthy cells?
Yes, they start attacking your own normal tissue, and that's called autoimmune diseases. Can anyone name an autoimmune disease unrelated to cancer? Yes. Rheumatoid's an
Wow,
awful
we've
one.
got a smart audience here, Georgina.
Rheumatoid is where your immune system attacks your joints, right? We sometimes see similar things as side effects with our immune drugs. So what happens is your T cells come in and they see the cancer and they think, that's an enemy, which is what you want. But then the cancer sticks out its handshake and shakes the hand of the T cell, and the T cell goes, oh, you're my friend. Okay, see you later. And they don't do the cell kill. So what our drugs do is they interrupt that handshake so that the T cell stays activated to kill the cancer. And so that's the concept of what we're trying to do.
Very tricky.
But sometimes one drug will only work if you already know you've got T cells that can all sort of see the cancer. And that's what we see in melanoma. About 50% of melanomas, we know the T cells already sort of have this idea that it's an enemy, but they just can't get rid of it. And so in other cancers, they don't even have that. We know they don't have any activation. And so that's the concoction that I'd come up with. But back to your question. Richard, you don't mind me saying this, but when Richard was diagnosed, it was probably diagnosed earlier because he was at high elevation and had been on flights. So can anyone tell us about pressure and why if you had something in your brain, it's a skull which is closed, and you have pressure and you go in high altitudes, why you might pick it up earlier?
Someone's got their hand up here.
What's that?
You get swelling of the brain, that's exactly right.
And at normal altitude, you won't pick it up, but if you go up into high altitude. So we had this opportunity. Richard was actually diagnosed, we think, a bit earlier than he otherwise would. So we had an opportunity to give drug before surgery.
Poland. A few tricks to try and get home, but yeah.
You were diagnosed, did you say in Poland?
Yeah, I've been lecturing over there and with a mate from Harvard who's actually from Poland originally. For his last hurrah, I wanted to put on a conference there. So I went over there to lecture for him, and the next day after the conference finished, him and his wife took my wife and I up into the mountains at the border of Slovakia and Poland, and climbs to see some incredible views, but the next day I didn't feel right and ultimately had a seizure, and ultimately an MRI scan showed that I had a tumour in my brain.
That is another extraordinary part of your story. I hope you bought him a vodka shot or something similar to thank him. I mean, that probably has saved your life in some ways, because if not but for that, how would this have been diagnosed? Or
Well, it would have been diagnosed fine. They've got a great medical system in Poland, but I wouldn't have had the opportunity to come back to Australia, meet up with Georgina and the rest of the team to put this plan forward. Why don't we give it a crack and see if we can make a difference to try something that for treatments that haven't changed in 20 years, and the cancer's virtually uniformly fatal. So.
and you talk a lot about giving things a crack in your speech when you accepted the Australian of the Year's Award, the Australians of the Year Award. You talked about giving things a red hot crack, which is a fantastic message for these young people about having a go and taking a risk.
But I think that's really important in all aspects of life. You know, you want to make a difference, you want to do something, don't just lean in, leap in and give it your best shot. If you really want to make a difference, be bold, be courageous. And I think that's one of Georgina's characteristics that is one of the reasons why we've made such a difference in melanoma. So I think that's something everyone can learn from. You have to be cautious at times and weigh things up, but ultimately to make a difference, you have to be bold, be courageous, and don't just lean in, leap in.
A message.
Sorry, you go. Message.
Oh, there's a question up here somewhere.
I
Please.
haven't answered the first question.
Oh, you've still got a bit more.
She asked a very specific question, and that was, what are the steps? When is this going to be available?
Yes.
So I want to make the first point. Number one, we got an early diagnosis. It enabled us to do something that's very unusual for brain cancer patients, and I'm not sure about your dear friend Roz, Mac, but often the way it's diagnosed is it comes out of the blue, they end up in emergency with headaches, and it's just trundling along. It's at a more progressed stage. And so therefore it's very hard to intervene with drug first. So
It may not be trundling, it may be racing along.
Trucking along.
So yeah, trucking along. So this was an unusual opportunity. Richard's wife sent me the scans. Because I'm in cancer, I have a network. I sent the scans to our radiologist and Brenda Shivalingam, who was Richard's surgeon. And the first 24 hours were just grief, because we're medical, we know what's going on. And then the next, in fact, probably the first 12 hours were grief. And then the next were, this has got to change. So immediately I started looking at clinical trials. There were none. That's how you make change, to answer your question, clinical trials. The second thing I said, well, what else can be done? And came up with this plan, and it's a complicated plan. I don't think we need to go through the details of that. And there's some other added treatments within it. The next steps, once you've got one patient, it's not evidence. This is not evidence. The next step is a clinical trial. And so that's where, in fact, I started working on that almost immediately last year.
I just want to add one thing. We don't just do clinical trials at the Melanoma Institute. We do a lot of basic science research, and we've got a great team of people that Georgina and I lead who really know how to do things. We've set up the world's largest melanoma biobank. We've got the greatest number of patients who've been generous enough to allow us to collect information about them. So we know how to do things from a science perspective to make a difference. The team got together and applied science to my brain tumour to produce some evidence of how hard people should go down this path of doing a clinical trial to see if it would work. And the science that's been generated is promising. It's worth pushing this field further.
I think it's an important point, because we've done it with cancer and melanoma particularly. I was enabled, even within 48 hours now we're talking, to get the head of biobank, a woman called Nick, who's fantastic, Professor Helen Rizos, she's a cell biologist, anyone interested in cell biology, incredible researcher, another oncologist called Nash. I got them together, and on a Tuesday, while Richard's still in Poland, we're planning and thinking of what to do for the analysis. At this point, the plan I'd come up with was not implemented. I had to go and get all this stuff and do this other work, but we were planning early. Why could we do it? Because we'd done it before with melanoma 1 million times over. And so that enabled us to collect the important basic science to understand what we may have achieved. So the next step is a clinical trial. Once you have a clinical trial, you then get a sense of activity, if this is real, and more than just one person, and then it becomes available widely around the world if that clinical trial is positive. So that's the steps. They're the scientific steps. And the reason we have those scientific steps, does anyone want to guess? Why do we need a framework like this? Why do we have governance, research governance? Yes.
Stop false positives.
Exactly. Stop false positives and to prove things, as Richard mentioned, because you can do a lot of harm if you don't do it the right way. Let's say I thought cockatoo was going to cure cancer, and we don't have any research governance, and we don't have any system or infrastructure. We can do a lot of harm, and certainly that's what would have happened in years gone by. I'm talking 200-300 years ago, before we had these good structures or understanding, and we didn't have a lot of knowledge. A lot of damage can be done to people when you don't have a research governance structure. And being someone who looks after patients, and as a clinician, that is real, and it happens. And someone may walk in and say, I'm dying of cancer, you give me anything, I'll take anything. But if you make them really sick, they will not thank you. People will not thank you for that. If it doesn't work and you make their last days terrible because of what you've given them. And I can't press that upon people enough, but you can only walk that walk having held that responsibility in your hands. It is huge, making someone's life a misery because you think it will work.
And I guess one challenge that we had was getting the neuro-oncology team on board to make this happen. And one of the things that they were scared about was that for immunotherapy to work, you can't give, or it's not a good idea to give chemotherapy beforehand because it suppresses your immune system and suppresses all cells within the body. So doing that for the sort of cancer that I've got reduces your chance of survival, cuts it in half basically by not having that, so go down this route. So yeah, it was risky that people were scared about it, but I'm fortunate I'm still here, so that risk didn't pan
Well,
out.
you've become a human guinea pig.
Not a word we like.
A guinea pig?
No. Guinea
Talk to
pigs,
me about that.
Yes. Again, back to research governance. A guinea pig, do they consent? They're in a cage. They're completely controlled by the human. That's a terrible analogy. I'll just say, please.
Thank you for that.
So I have to say, consent
is key.
Absolutely key. I do this all day, every day in my clinics. Consent, understanding the risk to the best of that person's ability is critical. People are not guinea pigs. And I have to say...
You would hear that bandied around a lot though, I guess.
Yes.
You've probably heard that a lot over the last 12... I'm not the first person to have put that to you, I hope.
And that's why I can strongly respond.
Yes.
Because it's such a bad analogy, and it's not coming from you, Mac.
Yes.
No, it's a
throwaway phrase that we use.
It is a throwaway phrase, but what it holds, and language is important. So all of you, if you're science-based, I hope you're doing your English as well, because language and written word is powerful as a scientist.
So you don't expect that it's going to play such a pivotal role in science?
Yeah. What writing?
Language,
It's so important. So humans consent. All our patients on clinical trials are part of the consent process. They have to be comfortable, they have to understand to the best of their ability, they may not be scientists or oncologists, and understand the risks involved in consenting to a clinical trial or experimental treatment. Very critical. So no more
questions.
Hi. So my question was for Richard mainly, and it was just about his personal experience and was he aware or conflicted when he first got diagnosed, and the kind of time frame of that, from when he got diagnosed, when did he start the immunotherapy treatment and not the other treatment?
Well, that's a question. Yeah, it's actually a difficult question for me to answer. If I'm brutally honest, I don't think I'm over the issue of the diagnosis and how it's turned my life upside down now. It's not obviously not something you're expecting, to have your life thrown in front of you, that this is going to be the end of it shortly, came out of the blue, totally wasn't expected, and my life's been turned upside down. The normal things that I like to do, I can't do all of them. To try and help me cope mentally, I've still stayed involved with many of the things that I like doing. So our research team I meet with every day, and our responsibilities as co-medical directors. But I don't work as a diagnostic pathologist at present, and I get sent thousands of cases around the world where every year for people who are struggling with a diagnosis, and the interactions that I normally have with friends and colleagues, and surgeons ring me up every day to chat about things. I don't have those same interactions. So that's been a very, very tough battle, and I'm still battling with it now. Hopefully as we move through the journey, I'll be more comfortable with it, but I'm not there yet.
What about the question of delaying the surgery? I think that was the other part of the question. How did you feel about, having gone through it with you, how did you feel? Was it you or the others people that had the struggle with that?
So just to clarify, initially I had a biopsy that was done to prove the diagnosis of brain cancer, and as cancer researchers and someone who's been at the forefront of so much cancer research, one of the problems that we often have is there's not enough tissue taken out for us to do all our fancy molecular tests, and there's not too much spare tissue in the brain. So working with Brenda, the neurosurgeon, with some encouragement, we grabbed a bit more brain out than what you'd normally take to make a diagnosis, to allow us to do more research. And then there was this delay between when I had that biopsy, a diagnosis was established, Georgina and her colleagues gave me the immunotherapy. The tumour wasn't debulked until 16 days later. And in melanoma, we wait till 6 weeks after the therapy's given to delay then. So, that's what sprung to mind, because I've seen down the microscope the incredible changes that we see, and we still take biopsies in melanoma usually about 3 weeks afterwards, and it's variable in the changes that you see. But Brenda said, look, if we wait 6 weeks, about a third of patients, the tumour will just take off, and that'll be the end of it for you. You won't get any surgery. You'll be looking right down the barrel of digging a grave for you. So we negotiated it, and we came up with a time of, it turned out to be 16 days after the first surgery, and we saw some changes. But if I'm brutally honest, not quite as many as what we see in melanoma.
Right, but a lot more than we were expecting, actually. A lot more than we were expecting at that early juncture. But it's interesting because the presentation at high elevation was a little different to brain cancer at normal elevation, which is more progressed. There were a few different, what we call differential diagnoses on the list of could this be the worst kind of brain cancer. I must say Brenda Shivalingam, our surgeon, really thought it was, but there was still a list of other types of brain cancers or disease processes that were still on the list. And having that tissue allows to be very much more confident about that diagnosis. And the other thing is it enabled us to also get working on, as Richard said, the DNA characteristics and the RNA characteristics of the tumour, so that I could start thinking about another type of treatment other than the drugs we gave up front. So we're 13 days before the actual drugs and the final surgery, 16 from biopsy to final surgery. But you were pretty okay with that delay. It was more everyone around you was more of a concern.
I've been so intimately involved in the use of neoadjuvant therapy in melanoma and seeing what it's done. And I like to joke, it was a no-brainer for me to go down that
I could tell you had a sense of humour when you said, when Georgina came up with her plan, that's a no-brainer. This guy's got a sense of humour. We've got 5 minutes and 2 quick questions. One over, a couple down here. Yes, please.
Sorry, hi, my name's Alex, and I'm from Shenton College. I was just wondering, because you were talking about the next steps in the immunotherapy research was to create clinical trials, and you mentioned about the ethics of that and how quite challenging it was. I was wondering how you're going to combat all the ethical problems, such as potentially having a 50% worse survival rate using immunotherapy compared with chemotherapy, and I was just wondering how you were going to combat the ethical challenges in order to get a clinical trial moving forward.
Wonderful question, and this is what we do. This is my bread and butter when I write trial protocols with drug therapies. We're always thinking about the harms that can come, and that's why when you write a clinical trial protocol, you then have to submit it to an ethics committee. So it goes through an ethics committee, which is made up of medical experts, pharmacy experts, and members of the community. And one thing about a terminal illness is when what we call the median survival for the current standard is only 14 months. It's not difficult, and it's funny, who on the ethics committee are the most open about pushing those boundaries and say, hey, if the median survival is 14 months and it gets shrunk down to 9 months, but you have a chance that it might be a cure or go to 2 years, the community are actually the bravest and the most courageous in that. The medical people are very concerned, rightly so, because they end up taking the full responsibility of that. I'm there looking at the eyes of the patient, right? They're much more conservative, but it's interesting. So it's by committee, an ethics committee. They look at all the pros and cons. If they see that there's what we call equipoise and it makes sense, it goes through. Sometimes they'll write back questions to the researchers or clinicians about what about this and what about that. But it's also all in the design of the trial. So for instance, we haven't gone through this nuance, but there's a type of brain cancer called methylated, unmethylated. Unmethylated don't tend to respond well to chemo. Methylated do have a response to chemo, a better response. So in this new trial, there's an arm of unmethylated that get pure immunotherapy, and the equipoise is there because we know that the chemo doesn't work very well anyway. So you've asked a very good question. It's nuanced, there's layers to it, and it's all in the design of the trial and how we manage risk. But when you've got good researchers putting it together, that gets managed well. And when you've got a good ethics committee, they pick up and ask the right questions.
I just wanted to pitch in that the importance of ethics in research is not just in clinical trials, it's actually in all the research that we do, even on patient specimens, on basic research. Yeah, that we have to take that to the ethics committee. It needs to get approved before we can do anything, even just clinico-pathological data related to patients. It all needs to be above board, and people need to be comfortable that it's the right thing to do.
One last question, I promised you over here.
Down here, yep.
Oh, there's one over here first.
With a microphone.
You guys got to pick.
Yep, there's one up here.
Hi, sorry. My name's Luca and I go to Mount Lawley. And I just wanted to ask how you see your research contributing to global issues and what role you think Australia plays in addressing these challenges through scientific and academic inquiry.
I love that because...
So you might have written it, Georgina.
Georgina wrote that, didn't she?
I did not. Science is so important. We didn't get to actually interact on how many of you, do science, but I asked the question at the beginning about curiosity, because that's the beginning of science, asking a question. Everything that's big and major will come down to some solution that science can give us, whether it be climate change, whether it be medical problems, whether it be communication issues, whatever it is, at the heart of it, science will deliver. It's not perfect, but it tries. And it recognises that it's not perfect. We know as scientists we don't have the full answer. We're just going to do what we can with what we have and keep evolving. It is critical. Australia's got a fabulous education system, and we've got great opportunities here to make a difference if we think really big. Think not what you can do just for one, what can you do for more, which is why pretty quickly after Richard, clinical trials in planning, think big, how can I make a difference, and work together, because you can if you think the right way and think about the bigger picture. Frankly, the planet's been around for many, 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 many millions of years before us, and we have to think as big as that.
I wanted to add in two things. First of all, I think we should be really proud in Australia. It's not just in melanoma, but we have made a big difference on the world stage, and it's partly because of who we are as Australians. People want to work together, they want to be committed, they want to make a difference, and I feel like maybe we don't have confidence that that's who we are and what we do, but we are outstanding people, outstanding country, and teamwork is a big part of that.
One final question. Is it Emily?
Yeah. So you were talking about autoimmune diseases before, and I was wondering how this trial might affect people with diseases such as autoimmune diseases.
That's a good question. So this is back to the trial design that a few of you asked. So when we do put clinical trials, because safety is number one, safety of the human, people with severe autoimmune diseases can't actually participate because you can kill them, really, when you overactivate their immune system. But good news is, when it's standard, we develop techniques and ways to manage the autoimmune disease with the new drugs, and that's an area we're working on, and it's successfully too. So sometimes we combine drugs, special biologics, that stimulate the T cells one way that block just one specific part so the autoimmune disease doesn't flare. But I had one other, I hope that answers your question. So we're working on that. It's a great question. We still haven't got from the audience, and maybe they can tell us later, how can we manage glamorization of tanning? What do you suggest we do? It's got to stop.
Quick suggestions, or we've got a quick suggestion here.
I'd say definitely amongst young people, social media is probably one of the greatest mechanisms.
Social media, yep. Great suggestion.
Yeah, from there first might be the best and most effective method in tackling that amongst young people.
Thank you very much.
So the very tool that propagates it, we've got to use for good.
How interesting is that answer?
It's wonderful.
The questions have been outstanding. I don't at all want to be either Morgan or our judges in deciding the best questions here. We wouldn't be here at all today without the amazing people from the Australia Day Council of Western Australia, from Aspire. And I would like to thank and introduce the CEO of Aspire WA, Morgan Lewis, to finish the day off this morning.
Vote of thanks. Wow, thank you, guys. Another round of applause for I don't need a microphone, you can hear me. At the risk of being the only thing standing between you and your grumbly tummies, I'm going to be quick, okay? It's lunchtime, I know. I am Morgan Lewis. I am the CEO with the absolute privilege of being involved with the Australian of the Year Awards. We run a Western Australian chapter of the Australian of the Year Awards, working with our colleagues around the country so that we will always have a West Australian in the running. We have Sydney, people from New South Wales this year, but hey, who knows, maybe next year we will have a West Aussie. The Australian of the Year Awards have been a part of Australians and our way of life since 1960, was before I was even born. It really has grown in significance over the last 64 years to be the nation's preeminent award. It offers that really great insight into what is our nation's evolving relationship with the world. How does the world see us? What is driving the temperature? Not literally the temperature, but what is the important stuff that Australians at the moment are really focused on? And that's why these awards have been so exciting to be a part of. And certainly from my point of view, I feel really privileged to be involved and get to hang with these sorts of people who inspire me through the work that they do. I know that you probably have another 100 questions you would have liked to have asked, and we're going to get to the two best questions in a sec. But bear with me. I wanted to just also flag that these awards provide a great platform for people like this, amazing people like this, who do inspire us with their achievements, but they're also about being people who can be the voices of the voiceless. And so sometimes people that win an Australian of the Year award, they're the ones that challenge us to also make our contribution to being, to adding to and contributing to a better Australia. So that's why the program excites me so much. And we've closed nominations for this year, but you guys, it will be open again soon, so you need to nominate who inspires you for Australian of the Year award. I'm sure you'll agree that our 2024 Australians of the Year, Richard and Georgina, we're allowed to drop the professor now. They're besties, right? They're no exception. They're no exception. They have, on behalf of everyone today, I want to say thank you for making the time to travel to Perth and be our special guest for this forum today. I do also want to, my absolute huge thanks go to the Education Department team for pulling this together, and Deputy Director Jim Bell. Couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much. And also to Principal Burke, thank you, and to your amazing students for being such gracious hosts to us and everyone else here today. It really has been a wonderful session. These sorts of forums don't just happen. As you can see, there's been a whole bunch of people involved behind the scenes. There is one organisation I really want to make a call out to, because I'm really proud that we've been doing these types of forums with Australian of the Year alumni for 5 years now, with 2 or 3 of these forums a year, with our youth partner who helps us with the youth leadership piece of what we do, and that's Perdaman Global. And I'm going to call up Perdaman in a second to draw the prizes and to say a few words. But what I took out of the message today is be curious, really important, and be bold, be courageous, don't just lean in, leap in. And that's the Aussie value of fair go. You've got to have a great hard crack. Give everything you have the opportunity to do. Give it a really great fair go.